Hi, it's Alejandro for the Brewers. And in this video, we're super excited to share with you our latest release, AB vortEx. We like thinking of AB vortEx like a spatial space-time designer because even though initially it might seem like it's another reverb, it just goes way beyond the traditional reverb concept. For starters, it works in ambisonics, so it doesn't matter if you throw at it a mono, a stereo, or even an ambisonic signal. All the processing within the engine of the plugin will happen three-dimensionally in ambisonics, and then it will throw back a stereo signal or an ambisonic signal that you can later decode to stereo, binaural, surround, or even Dolby Atmos beds, or even custom speaker arrays. So there is that, and then there is also the fact that you can control the time and the space independently, and you can control the viscosity at which these changes happen. So it becomes a very powerful tool for sound designers because you can really go far, far away from what's conventional. Finally, you can also control the color of the reverberations with, nearly unlimited combinations that will always give you a different color. There are many more things that you can do with AB vortEx. We're going to explore them in the video. And so now let's just go to the DAW and see what we have here. So I have a very basic session here that contains a stereo recording, a second order ambisonics recording, and a first order ambisonics recording. My session is a simple Dolby Atmos session in which the 3 tracks right now are going to my standard bed, and my standard bed is going to my renderer. And finally, I am sending my renderer to a stereo track that I'm using to record this video. But in my room, I'm listening to the 714 mix. So there are 2 ways you can work with vortEx. You either can have it as an insert in your track, or you can have it as a send. We're going to explore both ways, and we're going to start by using it as an insert. So let's start by exploring this sound field recording and see what it's got. Okay, so I can hear there is something just going around me very fast, like a kind of a rope or something like that. And since this is a first order ambisonics track, it's being decoded automatically by Nuendo to 712, which is the width of my bed. And if I check on my renderer, you have the bed, and if I press play, you can hear that you have sound coming out of the bed. And this is how I'm going to work with this track. So I'm going to insert vortEx here. And because it's an ambisonics track, you can see that the input is an ambisonic and the output is in ambisonics. So basically, I'm just keeping the resolution of the original track, which is first order ambisonics. And the easiest way to start with vortEx is just to play with the universe path. vortEx engine is going to be recalculating the reflections algorithm so that they always sound in unique ways. So let me lower the drive volume and see how vortEx sounds out of the box. Okay, so initially vortEx sounds just like a reverb, and now I'm going to start playing with the universe path to recalculate the reflections algorithm. So you can notice that you can make very interesting transitions, and thanks to the viscosity control, you can make these transitions flow faster or slower. So if I increase the viscosity to 100 and try it again. So initially, this is your first tool, the universe path plus the viscosity. As long as you click within this circle, your reflections will always be like a traditional digital reverb. And when you get out of the circle, they're gonna become more experimental. And finally, when you get to any corner, or if you increase the space to 100, the reflections are going to freeze. But the difference between vortex freeze and a traditional reverb freeze is that generally in a traditional reverb, once you freeze the signal, the reverb stops receiving sound and it just gives you a frozen print of the last reflection. Vortex never stops getting sound. So you can freeze the reflections and at the same time you can feed vortex with more sound so that you make your frozen pad reflections fatter and fatter all the time. So let's try and do that. So you can see that I froze my signal and I fed vortex a couple of more times with different parts of the sound. Another nice thing you can do is recalculate the algorithm while keeping the frozen reflections. So if you want the universe path not to control any of the knobs that it controls, you can always just click on the lock button so that you can manually control it. And that way I can just play with the reflections and play with the space control independently. So if I go like this, you can hear that this sounds pretty cool. So let me just open the fine-tuning controls, which help me change the colors of the reflections. So for example, when we listen to something and we just freeze it, you can see that every time I move any of these controls, the color of the reflections changed. And so forth, even if the signal is frozen, you can still manipulate the reflections with some of the controls. And this is what I'm going to do now with the modulators. I'm just going to play with the modulators and just do something experimental. So it's a pretty interesting concept, you know, like I freeze the reflections and then I just completely start messing with them. Let me just explain a little bit what I did here. I enable my modulators and then I send some of the fine-tune controls to a very slow modulator, a bit faster modulator that happens every 2 seconds, and then another control to a very fast modulator. Additionally, I added 8 decibel in a frequency that changes again with my third modulator. As you can see, this control doesn't move all the way to the minimum and to the maximum because I have modified the boundaries of the minimum and maximum in this modulator, and that way I can set the limits at which this modulator moves the control. Finally, I assigned the time control to the first modulator, which is again working with this control. And this is how I created a very experimental type of ambience. Now let me remove this track and move to my next track. I'm going to go to my stereo track and I'm going to show you how you can use AB vortEx to blow up a stereo recording that contains no depth and no height into a completely immersive experience for Dolby Atmos. So the first thing I'm going to do is convert this stereo track to an object. So I'm going to go to the ADM and I'm going to create an object from the selected track. And as you can see, this track is now an object. And if I check on my renderer, you see that the 2 objects have been reserved for the track. Now I'm going to add a group track, which is going to contain AB vortEx, because from here on, I'm going to be using AB vortEx as a send effect. So the group track is going to be a third order ambisonics track because I want it to be with the highest resolution possible. And I'm just going to name it vortEx. And finally, to this track, I'm going to add AB vortEx. I'm going to lower the dry volume because this track is going to be receiving dry signals from other tracks. And I'm going to send this track to my group track. So what I'm doing here is the following. I have a stereo track, which is an object, which is my stereo object, and which is also being sent to a group track, which goes to my bed. So basically, I have my stereo track playing in my left and right object, and the reflections happening on the bed. So without AB vortEx, this track sounds like this. You can hear that you have only sound coming from the left and from the right, and from the channels left and right from my renderer. Now, if I add vortEx so that I give it depth, and right out of the box, it sounds like this. So right out of the box, vortEx has already given my stereo recording depth and height. I can already hear the reflections happening behind me, above me, on my sides and everything, even though the original object is in my front left and my front right. And another super cool thing is that my object is being sent to my group track and vortEx is already processing all the information no matter how my object is positioned in my spatial field. So it doesn't matter if I move my dry sound anywhere around me, AB vortEx will always be creating the reflections based on the position where I have my object in. So if I lower the volume of my piano and I move the object, you can hear that the reflections also move with my object. So my object and my vortEx track are separated, but the vortEx track is reacting accordingly to the position of the object track. Now, let's quickly apply a static set of reflections to this piano so that it can fit any music environment. Okay, this sounds fine. And finally, I'm going to do something that I personally love doing, which is rotating my reflections 180 degrees, which means that the reflections are always going to be rotated opposite to the side where my object is. So if I put my object in front, the reflections are going to be rotated, so I'm going to have more acoustic weight on the back. And like this, I feel that my signal is a bit more fulfilling. So if we mix this with our dry channel, I can hear that this piano already contains width, depth, height. It just completely fills my room. And this is a very cool way that you can use A/B vortex to blow up any two-dimensional or monodimensional signal into a 7.1.4 Dolby Atmos environment. And finally, let's explore the last track, which is a second-order ambisonics recording. This recording was provided by the guys at Octomic, which is a microphone that records directly in second-order ambisonics. So it's got a lot of clarity and beautiful definition in the three-dimensional image. So let's listen to what this track is all about. Okay, so we have a choir of women which are placed around the microphone. So I can hear all the voices all around me with beautiful detail. It's absolutely amazing. So let's start by creating an object from this track. Because this track is in ambisonics, it cannot be converted directly to an object, but I can route it through a 714 track and then create a three-dimensional object. So I'm gonna create a 714 group track and I'm gonna name it choir object. I'm gonna put it on the left just to keep things tidy. And I'm going to send my recording to that group track. And so if I listen to it, I have kept all the three-dimensional information of this recording. So now through the ADM, I'm going to convert this track to an object. I'm going to go to the ADM and I'm going to create an object from the selected track. And now if I check on my renderer, I can see that all the objects have been reserved for this track, and I can see that the objects have been placed three-dimensionally to fulfill the configuration of my track. So if I now rotate the track, you can see the objects rotating. So this means that this object is now three-dimensional. And finally, I'm going to send this track to my vortEx group, pre-fader, which means now that my dry track is going to be coming through the objects, but vortEx will still come from my bed. And still, vortEx is going to be tied to the three-dimensional transformations that I apply to my three-dimensional object. So if I listen to the previous configuration of vortEx with this choir, let's see how it sounds. I can hear that the reflections completely fill my room, and from a very dry recording, it's converted it to something that could easily come from a cathedral or a cave or something with a lot of reflections. It's a beautiful, beautiful instant result. And it doesn't matter if I transform my object, vortEx will work with the information I throw at it. Now, let's just say that I wanted to just load any of my presets to apply to this recording. So for example, let's just say that I'm just gonna add the cathedral preset. And just out of the box, it will sound like this. So this is a beautiful and practical way to give life to a recording that is otherwise very dry. And I can, of course, go further and start messing with it so that it just becomes more sound designy type of thing. So yeah, let's just experiment and see what we can do. I'm going to lower the dry volume. And I'm just going to start messing with the reflections to see how far it can get me. Let me just loop this and let's go for it. Let's just do something a little bit more claustrophobic. So you can see that this goes beyond reverberation. And this is something that we are so proud to have done. And, you know, we really hope that you enjoy AB vortEx in your either musical projects or sound design projects. And well, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment below. And just let's keep making sound.